Moed Katan Daf Yod Tet 19. We begin with the Mishnah about writing on Chol Moed, and then the next Mishnah will be laws of what happens when Avelut, mourning, coincides with Yom Tov and Chol Moed. So we begin En Kotvin Shitre Chov Bamoed. Ve'im eno ma'amino or she'en lo mayochal hareze ichtov. One may not write in general, and so one cannot write a bill of debt. If you lend someone money, you can lend someone money, they need it, but you can't write. However, two exceptions: if you don't trust the person and then you're not sure if you're going to get paid back, then you can write because you want to make sure that you'll be able to get paid back later. Or the other condition is if the scribe is very poor and so poor he has nothing to eat, then you can hire the scribe because giving him money will allow him to eat on the holiday, and so that itself is a good thing and is a good reason to make an exception. En kotvin sefarim tefillin mezuzot b'moed. One may not write Torah scrolls, tefillin mezuzot on the holiday, and this would be because in general writing is a problem, but this in particular is very professional writing. Right, you have to write, according to halacha, like calligraphy, and so this type of professional writing is especially problematic. We saw yesterday the opinion of Rambam that says writing optional letters, reshut, right? That's much less of a problem. Then magihin ot achat afilu besefer Ezra, and one may not even correct a single letter, even if it's in Sefer Ezra. Okay, what is Sefer Ezra? That sounds like it's referring to the Torah that Ezra HaSofer presented when he came from Babel to Eretz Yisrael. And in Eretz Yisrael, they forgot the Torah, they didn't have it. So Ezra gave it presented to them, and this Torah was stored during the second Bet HaMikdash in the Bet HaMikdash. So that would be if you read it Ezra with an Aleph. However, if we look at the manuscripts here, we'll see that Ezra with an Aleph occurs only in the Vilna edition and in one manuscript. Also in one other manuscript, it's erased, the Aleph is erased and the He is added. In all the other manuscripts, including the best manuscripts, like the Yemenite one and Sfaradi manuscripts, have a He. In that case, it means Sefer HaAzara, that is the Sefer Torah that's stored in the Bet HaMikdash, which is similar in the sense that it is the master copy. When people would copy Sefer Torah, inevitably, just by human error, mistakes happen. But we have the master copy in the Bet HaMikdash itself, the one that the Kohen Gadol would use to read on Yom Kippur. And so if there should be a mistake in it, you want to fix that right away because that's really, really important. And nevertheless, not on Chol Moed. It's quite amazing to think that there could be a mistake in the original master copy. Perhaps it's not a mistake. Maybe it's just that some ink got cracked and so it needs to be fixed. So you should fix it, but not on Chol Moed. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, kotev adam tefillin umezuzot le'atzmo v'tover dirachot techelet lisisito. Rabbi Yehuda is more lenient and says, while he agrees that one cannot write Sifrei Torah, you can write tefillin and mezuzah for yourself because maybe you need it on Chol Moed. This is interesting because it would show that according to the Mishnah law, one probably does wear tefillin on Chol Moed, even though nowadays this is a difference between Ashkenazim and Sephardim. So either that, or maybe he needs to write tefillin now because he needs it for right after the holiday. Anyway, mezuzot, he may need it on the holiday, so he can write it for personal use. And let's say he needs sisit, so spinning wool also is a melacha, but if you need the sisit, you can do it, but you should do it in an unusual way. Rather than use a spindle the regular way, one would spin the wool around his thigh. Okay, the Gemara will discuss this further. Teno Rabbanan, kotev adam tefillin umezuzot le'asmo v'toveh al yirecho techelet lesisito. So now we have a Baraita that's going to bring a few more opinions than just the two opinions that we saw in the Mishnah. You could try to line them up. They don't line up exactly, but anyway, Tanakama here says that you can write tefillin mezuzot for yourself, and you can make sisit for also for yourself if you used your thigh instead of a spindle. That's Tanakama here. It sounds similar to Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah. But here add something. You can also do it for others as long as you don't get paid for it. Right? You know how to make sisit, you know how to write tefillin. you can make it for someone else as a favor, and that's Rabbi Meir's opinion. The Yehuda here in this Baraita Omed, Ma'arimu mocheret shelo vechozer vechotev le'atzmo. He has a better way. You can sell yours, and then you can go ahead, and now you need one because you don't have one anymore. You don't have tefillin anymore, so you can write it for yourself. So he knows this is a trick, but it's a permitted trick because, yeah, you can sell yours because the person needs it, and now you don't have any. So that's a way of being able to do it for others, not bitova, not as a favor, not for free, be able to get money for it. Rabbi Yosef says even more lenient and says, yeah, you can write the normal way if that's your livelihood. So you're allowed to make a living dependent on it, and so that is permitted. Okay, there's a picture of the snails that we get the techelet from, and the picture of someone spinning wool. This time here using a spindle. Okay, Ore le Rav Chananel, Vamri la Rabba bar Chananel, halacha. So we have a halacha is like the lenient opinion that yes, you can write tefillin mezuzot if it's needed for yourself, and also you can write it for others and sell it. Good. Next case, you can spin techelet on one's thigh. So the Mishnah seems to be following this opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that you can do it on the thigh, but not on a rock. They say you can use a rock. So a rock is somewhere in between a spindle and a thigh. A rock makes it easier to do, but not as easy as a spindle. So still an unusual way. Yehuda says in his name, yes, you can write it. It's clarifying. You can use a rock, but not a spindle. Chachamim are the most lenient and says you can use anything. You can even use a spindle to make threads for sisit. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shemuel v'chen Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha ben be'even ben bepelech halacha kotev kedarko mocher kedei parnasato. So Shemuel in Bavel and Rabbi Yochanan Eretz Yisrael, they all agree that you can use a rock or a spindle, and they say halacha is that one can write and sell if it's needed, tefillin, mezuzot, if that's needed for his livelihood. So even though the Mishnah was somewhat stringent, the other opinions here that are brought in the Baraita win the day. Okay, and now back to the laws of Avelut. When they overlap with Yom Tov and Chol Moed. Hakoveret meto shelosha yamim kodem laregel batela hemenu gezerat shiv'ah. So someone who loses a relative, and he already 3 days before the beginning of a Yom Tov, so Yom Tov breaks that Shiv'ah, and that's it. The Shiv'ah is finished. You see, according to the Mishnah law, the Yom Tov breaks the Shiv'ah only if he already sat Shiv'ah for 3 days. The first 3 days of Shiv'ah are particularly stringent, particularly mournful, and therefore those are necessary. If a person, according to the Mishnah, if a person buried a loved one only 1 or 2 days before Yom Tov, then the Yom Tov would not break it. He wouldn't mourn publicly on Yom Tov, but rather he would sit Shiv'ah 1 or 2 days before Yom Tov and have to finish the other days, other 5 days after Yom Tov ends. So that's the Mishnah law. That is not a halacha today. Halacha today is that even if someone sits Shiv'ah only 1 day, Yom Tov breaks the rest of the 6 days. Okay, but this is the Mishnah. The first 3 days cannot be broken. Shemona batlu hemenu gezerat sheloshim. Once a person sits 7 days and then already the 8th day begins before Yom Tov, so the 8th day is now after the Shiv'ah and is part of the Shiloshim. And so the Yom Tov will break the Shiloshim, and that would mean the person can take a haircut after that. Even on that very day, on that 8th day, if it's Erev Yom Tov, towards the afternoon, a person would be able to take a haircut in honor of Yom Tov, the proceeding. This is a very interesting phrase here in the Mishnah. It gives you the halacha, and then it says, you see that this is quoting an even earlier tradition. The Mishnah itself is relying on an old oral tradition that says a similar content, but it says it in a different style. It says Shabbat counts as one of the days, but does not break. So that, I mean, this every Shiva will inevitably have a Shabbat within it. And so if someone, when there is a Shabbat, so a person, let's say they started sitting on Thursday, so then Shabbat counts, Olah means it counts as one of the 7 days, but it does not break the 7 days. Whereas holidays are the opposite. They break the 7 days. They don't count as one of the days. And that would make sense here. If someone started sitting Shiva on right before the holiday, 1 or 2 days before the holiday, so then it would not, the days, so then it would not break it, and it would not count. They would not count towards the 7. You have to continue counting after. It does, however, break it if it's after 3 days, or it breaks the shiloshim no matter what. Once it's after the 8th day or on. Okay, so that's the same content. Now, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Mishecharav Bet Hamikdash Aseret Keshabbat. Rabbi Eliezer says not all holidays are the same. When it comes to Pesach and Sukkot, those are long holidays. They're 7 days, 8 days long. And so for sure, by the time the holiday ends, that's it. The Shiva is going to be finished. So those holidays break the Shiva, and that's it. After 3 days, they break the Shiva. However, as I said it, meaning Shavuot is different. During the time of the Bet HaMikdash, Shavuot was the same as the other holidays, because even though Shavuot was only 1 day, one had the opportunity to bring the korbanot associated with the holiday for the next 6 days. So Shavuot also had a 7-day aspect. However, after the Bet HaMikdash is destroyed, then Shavuot is really only 1 day. I mean, nowadays we do say Yishem for another 6 days. We don't say Tachanun because in Bet HaMikdash they did continue with Korbanot. But since we don't have Korbanot, so really the holiday is only 1 day. And so because it's so short, we treat it like Shabbat. And therefore, it counts as one of the 7, but does not break the Shiva. That's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, not the halacha. Rabban Gamliel Omer, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim Kirgalim. Rabban Gamliel says, not only all the holidays, the Regalim, but also Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Even though they are serious days, days of Teshuvah, they also have a festive aspect to them. And therefore, the festive aspect, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and even though they're only 1 day, they are like the holidays, and they break a Shiva or a Shiloshim. Hachamim omerim lo kedibrei zeh v'lo kedibrei zeh. Hachamim disagree with Rabbi Eliezer and Rabban Gamliel, and they say Ela aseret kirgalim. On the one hand, they disagree with Rabbi Eliezer. They say Shavuot. Even nowadays, even if the Bet HaMikdash is destroyed, Shavuot is like all the holidays. And Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim Kishabbat, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are not regalim. They're not as happy as regalim, and they're also only 1 day long, and therefore they are like Shabbat. So therefore, the Rosh Hashanah would count as one of the 7 days and would not break the 7 and would not break the Shiloshim, although it would count as one of the Shiloshim. Okay, so that's all the opinions. I mean, for halacha, nowadays we treat all 3 holidays and the high holidays like holidays, and so they all break a Shiva or break a Shiloshim, and they're all unlike Shabbat. Okay, so now we see the Gemara Amarav Gezerat Batlu Yamim Lo Batlu. So Rav says the Gezerah of 7 or 30 days. I mean, the Gezerah meaning all of the halachot that would apply to 7 days sitting on the floor or 30 days, cutting hair. Those things are nullified when a holiday comes, but the days themselves, the counting of the days, the holiday does not nullify. How could you have such a case? The Gemara will explain it. So even though again here he agrees that the restrictions of those 7 or 30 days are nullified, but the days themselves have to continue to be counted in some sense. However, Rav Sheshat says no. Once you have a holiday, it comes and it will cancel out even the counting of the days altogether for all purposes, 7 or 30. Okay, so let's see how this applies. My tama yamim lo batlu. My tama usually means what's the reason, but here we're going to say what is the application? Well, what is the case? According to this, let's say it's the 8th day of someone sitting Shiva, and then Yom Tov comes. So therefore, the halacha is, because the holiday came, one is allowed to cut his hair before the holiday in honor of the holiday. And in that sense, it breaks it. And if he does cut his hair before the holiday starts, then that's it. He can continue to cut his hair after the holiday. And so that's the sense that gezerat batlu. However, if a person decided not to cut his hair, he's okay with it, and he does not cut his hair before the holiday. Therefore, since he didn't take advantage of that leniency, now it will not be broken. And so you see that the 30 days actually continues in some sense. And if he didn't cut his hair before, he cannot cut his hair, not even after the holiday. And so the 30 days are not broken. And so, in other words, there's an opportunity to cut the decree of cutting hair, but in essence, the 30 days does continue. And if you don't take advantage of the leniency before the holiday, then it continues after the holiday. So this would be one application of the opinion of Rav. Vehatanya. And now we're going to bring a Braita. This Braita is actually going to have both opinions, both the opinion of Rav, that's more stringent, and the opinion of Rav Sheshet that says nullifies it altogether, no matter what. So which would mean even if you didn't take a haircut before the holiday started on that 8th day of mourning, you could still, there's no shiloshim. That's it. It's totally gone. So here's the Braita. HaKoberet meto shilosha yamim kodem la regel. But la hemenu gezerat shiva. Someone who buries his dead 3 days or more before the holiday starts. So once the holiday starts, it nullifies any gezerot, any decrees regarding the 7. He doesn't have to sit on the floor. That's it. His shiva is finished. Shemona yamim kodem la regel. If he lost and buried the person 8 days or more before the holiday starts, then that breaks the shiloshim. And therefore he can shave just before the holiday starts, even though technically it's the holiday at sunset that is breaking the shiloshim. And nevertheless, he can anticipate that a little bit of time before sunset and take a haircut before. But if he did not take advantage of that leniency and did not take a haircut before the holiday started, then he cannot cut his hair even after the regel. So you see, according to Tanakama here, the shiloshim does continue even after, right through the holiday and after the holiday. So it is still 30. It's just that there's an exception. If you cut your hair before, okay, then you can continue to cut your hair. If not, not. Abba Shaul Omer. As Abba Shaul, we saw him earlier in the previous stuff. Now this is the source. Mutar legalech achad haregel. He says, no matter what, it's okay. You can even if you didn't cut your hair before the holiday started, although you were allowed, you can continue cutting it after. So you see, according to Bashaul, the holiday breaks the shiloshim totally. There's no counting at all. So you see, Tanakama follows Rav, Rav follows Tanakama, and Abba Shaul will be the source for Rav Sheshat. Shekeshem shemisvat shelosha mebatet gezat shiv'ah. Abba Shaul's reasoning is that just like the mitzvah of 3 days breaks the 7 days. In other words, if he already sat for 3 days and the holiday comes, then the holiday breaks the 7. So too, if he already sat 7, finished the Shiv'ah, then the holiday will come and break the 30 days. In other words, the 30 days is completely stopped, and he can cut his hair no matter what. That's Abba Shaul, who's more lenient. Okay, good. So now we matched up the opinions of the Amoraim with opinions of Tanaim. But now that we mentioned this Baraita, we're going to notice that he says Gezerat Shiv'ah. Abba Shaul says on the 7, as long as you said 7, then the holiday will break. So we ask about that Shiv'ah. And our Mishnah says only if you're at the 8th day since the loved one was buried, then it can break the shiloshim. But according to Abba Shaul, it sounds like even if it's only the 7th day, then the 30 is broken. Why is that? Abba Shaul is of the opinion that partial day is like a whole day, and therefore the 7th day, at the beginning of the 7th day, once he sits for a few minutes in the morning, then a part of the day is like the whole day. He finished his Shiv'ah. The rest of the 7th day accounts towards the Shiloshim. And so since the Shiloshim already started on that day, if Yom Tov comes on the 8th day, then that's sufficient. You don't. That doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that you have 8 days and then Yom Tov. Even if you have 7 days and then Yom Tov starts, Yom Tov will break the Shiloshim. That's going to Bas Shaul. Amad of Chisda, Amad of Ina, Bas Shelah, Halacha ke Bas Shaul. In fact, Halacha is like him, even though he's a minority opinion. We follow that for Halacha. Umodim Chachamim la Bas Shaul, Keshachal Shemini Shelo, Liot B'Shabbat Erev HaRegel, Shemutar legalech be'erev Shabbat. And even the sages say, we don't say Miksatem Kekulo. You have to sit full 7 days. Right? And only once the 8th day starts, then you can break the Shiloshim. However, even Chachamim agree with Abba Shaul in the following case. When the 8th day of his mourning happens to be Shabbat and also Erev Chag. So in that case, because if it wasn't Shabbat, then that would be the 8th day, and he'd be permitted, that's the beginning of the Shiloshim, he would be permitted to cut his hair. But since it's Shabbat, he can't cut his hair that day, and therefore Chachamim will agree that he can cut his hair on the 7th day. In other words, treating it as if the 7th day is Miksat Hayom Kekulo, and the rest of the 7th day will count, and therefore he can cut his hair on Erev Shabbat, even though it's the only 7th day. Chachamim will agree to Abba Shaul in that case. Okay, now that we understand these two opinions, we're going to test out some other cases. Keman azlahad amar Rav Amram amar Rav Avel. He says a mourner, once the people that came to comfort him leave, then he can go and wash, meaning he's talking about the 7th day. In the morning of the 7th day, people come, right? Maybe they'll have minyan in his house and they'll eat some breakfast with him and they'll comfort him. And then they leave. Once they leave, that's it. He can get up and he's finished his Shiv'ah. Keman ke'Bas Shaul, that follows a Bas Shaul that says, part of the day is like the whole day. Miksat hayom kekulo. Amar Abaye halacha ke'Bas Shaul beyom shiv'ah umodim chachamim labas Shaul beyom shiloshim. Damrinan miksat hayom kekulo. Abaye says, yes, we agree that we can be lenient and we follow Abba Shaul regarding the 7th day. That a partial, or just the morning, a partial day is like the whole day. And even chachamim will agree with Abba Shaul regarding the 30, that once the 30th day comes, as long as you fulfill fulfill the morning practices in the morning of the 30th, you can go take a haircut on the afternoon of the 30th day, because the 30 days is much more lenient than the 7. Okay, that's Abaye. So Abaye in practice would say, yes, miksatem kekolo for 7 and 30. Rava amar halacha ke'Abas Shaul b'yom shiloshim, ve'en halacha ke'Abas Shaul b'yom shiv'ah. Rava is more stringent than Abaye, and he says, yes, we'll follow Abba Shaul regarding the 30. He doesn't think that Chachamim agree with Abba Shaul, but it doesn't matter. He does think that we can follow Abba Shaul for the 30, that partial day is the whole day, but not for 7. For 7, you have to keep 7 full days. That's Rava. When the rabbis in the Harda said, Halacha ke'Abba Shaul bezo ubezo. We follow Abba Shaul to be lenient for the 7 and the 30. So you see that in practice, he would agree with Abaye that you can be lenient on both, except they don't say that Chachamim agree. Even the Chachamim don't agree, they still think that you can follow the minority opinion for 7 and for 30. So it's the same in practice as Abaye. We have the principle we saw already for Shemuel, that when it comes to laws of mourning, one can, if there's a machloket, one can follow the lenient opinion. And that is what we follow today. Shiloshim yom minelan. Now the question is, where do we even derive the fact that there is a mourning period of 30 days? Here it is. Yalef pera min nazir. Kitivachara shechem al tifrau. Uchtivatam gadel pera se'ar rosho. Malalan shiloshim afkan shiloshim. There are the people that we see Bnei Yisrael mourn for them for 30 days, but doesn't say exactly what they did. So we want to source particularly that you can't cut your hair for 30 days. And so here it is. The word pera comes up twice. Once regarding the sons of Aharon who are mourning for their brothers, Nadav and Avihu, who died. Nevertheless, Hashem tells them, you should not let your hair grow loose, because they're Kohanim and they're serving. They are exceptional and they cannot. They have to keep their hair nice and kempt. They have to cut their hair. We learn from that any other mourner must not cut his hair. Okay, so, and now how long is that? Well, regarding a Nazir, it says he cannot cut his hair. He has to let it grow long. Now, how long is Nazir, a standard Nazir? Nazir could be any amount of time that he says, but if it just says, someone just says, I'm a Nazir, then we assume 30 days. So just like a Nazir cannot cut his hair for 30 days, so too the sons of Aharon would need to cut their hair for 30 days, but anyone else in mourning would not be able to cut their hair 30 days. And that's how we learned that there's a 30-day mourning period during which one cannot cut his hair. Now, regarding Nazir, it doesn't say explicitly anything about 30 days. How do you even know that a Nazir, Stam Nazir is 30 days? Amar Matana, Setam Naziru Sheloshim Yomai Tama Amar Kera Kadosh Yihiyeh. That the Nazir will be holy. Nazir is kind of like a temporary Kohen. And it says Yihiyeh gematria is 10.5 is 30. This is one of very few halachot that we learn from a gematria. Gematria is usually more for agada, not so much for halacha, but there are a handful of halachot that we do learn from gematria. Amar Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua hakol modin shekeshechal shelishi shelo להיות ערב הרגל שאסור ברחיסה עד הערב. Even though we saw the opinion of Abba Shaul and we follow Abba Shaul and we say partial day is like a whole day, that applies to 7 and 30. It does not apply to 3, right? Everyone agrees that if, let's say, the third day of one's mourning period is Erev Yom Tov, then he has to observe that entire day until right up to when the holiday begins, and you cannot just sit in the morning and say, oh, okay, partial day is the whole day. No, the third day has to be a complete day. Amar Rav Nechemia bered Rav Yehoshua ashkachtinuhu l'rapapi u'l'rapapa tiatbe v'ka'amre halacha k'Rav Huna bered Rav Yehoshua. Okay, this halacha that we're stringent here regarding the third day was originally said by Rav Yoshua, the son of Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, and Rav Nechemia says, I heard Rav Papi and Rav Papa sitting and saying halacha is like him. Okay, that's one version. Another version that amounts to the same thing is so not different Rav Nechemia, not the son of Rav Yoshua, but the son of Rav Yosef. And he says, Ashkachtinu, I once found Rav Papi and Rav Papa, the same two sages, and I also found with them was Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua, the author of this stringent opinion. They were all sitting together, and they all said, if it's the third day of his mourning is the Erev Chag, then he has to complete the entire day, and he cannot wash until the evening. So it amounts to the same thing. It's just that was Rav Papi and Rav Papa quoting Rav Huna, or was Rav Huna himself with Rav Papi and Rav Huna and Rav Papi and Rav Papa, and they're all together and they said halacha. Anyway, the point is that the third day one must be stringent. Now we have a question that this will be the last question for the daf. Abaye asks Rava. Okay, in that printed edition we have Rava here. If we look in the manuscripts, we see that yes, while the printed edition has Rava and some manuscripts have Rava, about half of them. However, the other half has Rabba with a he. So Rava is Abaye's colleague, Rabba is Abaye's teacher. And in fact, the best manuscripts, like the Yemenite manuscript, has Rabba, and Munich had an aleph, someone erased it and put a he in it. So it looks like the correct version is, in fact, the Rabba. That would be Abaye's teacher. So Abaye asks his teacher, Rabba, Kebaro baregel, regel ole lo leminyan sheloshim, o en regel ole lo leminyan sheloshim. Okay, interesting question. If someone's a relative dies during the holiday, so we bury them during the holiday. Right? We can for sure on Chol Moed, and even on Yom Tov, with the non-Jew on Yom Tov Rishon. Okay, so if someone buries his loved one on the holiday itself, so does the remaining days of the holiday, do they count towards the 30, towards Sheloshim, or maybe not? Now, to clarify the question, the Minyan Shiva says, I'm not asking about the 7, right? Everyone agrees that the Shiva, even when someone buries someone during the holiday, the Shiva starts after the holiday finishes. And the reason for that is because you can't you can't observe the mourning practices on the holiday, right? You have to tear your clothes and sit on the floor. You can't do any of those things on the holiday. So for sure, Shiva starts afterwards. What I'm asking about is the minyan shiloshim, the kana hagav misvat shiloshim ba'regel mai. So since during the holiday, during Yom Tov and Chol Moed, we can't cut our hair, we can't do laundry. So those are Chol Moed laws, but they happen to also be Avelut laws. So since we're doing those laws anyway, we're not cutting our hair. Therefore, it would make sense that the days of the Yom Tov, the remaining days of the holiday, Chol Moed and Yom Tov, should count towards the Shiloshim, which would be really interesting that you start counting the Shiloshim in the middle of the holiday, even though the Shiva, you only start counting after the holiday. That's his question. And the Rabbah answers, no, it does not count. You start counting the 7 and the 30 after on Motzei Echag. Okay, so that's his teacher's answer. But Abaye does not accept it, even though he's asking the question. You see, he had something in mind. Itibe challenges his teacher. Hakober et meto shnei yamim kodem haregel, moneh chamisha yamim achar haregel, umelachto naaset al yedei acherim. Abada v'shivchotav osim b'sina b'toch beto, v'en rabim mitasekin imo. So someone who buries his relative 2 days before the Yom Tov begins. So since it was only 2 days, Yom Tov does not break the Shiva'ah, right, according to the law of the Mishnah. And so therefore, he sat for 2 days, the holiday comes, and then he has to sit the remaining 5 days after the holiday finishes. And nevertheless, he can do work through others. Usually when someone's sitting Shiva, he cannot do work and people can't do his work for him. But this person, since he already sat 2 days, and then the holiday of 7 days came, and he wasn't working on the holiday either, so now we can be more lenient regarding the last 5 days, and even though he can't go to work because he's sitting Shiva, he can hire others to do his work, open the store, go work in the field, and his servants, slaves and maidservants can do work in the house quietly in private. But because he already did, it's already way past 7 days. So yes, he has to sit for another 5 days, but he can be more lenient. Also, Rabim, the public, does not have to deal with him, meaning to come and visit him and bring him food, since they're doing that for the first 7 days. She's sitting for 2 days, everyone's coming to visit. Even on Yom Tov and Chol Moed, people come to visit, right? We see this happen today when someone starts sitting Shiva and then the holiday comes and breaks it. Even though he's not sitting Shiva, people will come to his home and still visit. So since people are visiting, people only have to visit for 7 days altogether. So you have 2 days, and then during the holiday they visit. That's it. They don't have to visit anymore. So those last 5 days after the holiday, although he's sitting Shiva up because he has to finish the 7 days, but since he already didn't work for 7 days and people already came to visit for 7 days, those things do not apply anymore during the 5 days, and so other people can work for him and people do not have to visit. Okay, all this is not relevant to the question. We're getting to the answer to the question, but we're going to read all these interesting laws. Here's the reason: people already came to visit him during the holiday. Here's the general rule: anything that is regarding the laws of Avelut, the holiday will stop, and he's not going to sit on the floor anymore. But if it's about the people, the public helping him out, the holiday does not stop it. So this is really a good source that even when the holiday comes and breaks the Shiva, it breaks the Shiva in terms of the laws of mourning, but it doesn't break the Shiva in terms of the community coming to visit and coming to help out whatever the mourner needs. Good. So if he buries his relative 3 days before the end of the holiday, so then he will still count 7. In other words, person dies in the middle of the holiday, right? Let's say 3 days before the end. So he doesn't start sitting Shiva. For that reason, when the holiday ends, he has to sit whole Shiva all 7 days after the holiday ends. However, since there already were 3 days of the holiday during which the person, his relative, was already buried. Therefore, people are coming to visit right away. So if someone dies in the middle of the holiday, people are coming to visit him. They're visiting him for 3 days of the holiday, and therefore they only need to visit and provide for him 4 more days of the Shiva after the holiday. And the last 3 of the Shiva, people don't have to visit anymore. Because they already dealt with him during the holiday, and that counts. So you see, there's a distinction between the 7 days of Avelut that he mourns for, and the 7 days that people are coming to visit, and they can usually they overlap, but sometimes usually they're the same 7 days, sometimes they are not. Okay, now here's the key why we bring this whole thing. Veregel ole imo, and the holiday itself, the days of the holiday, count for him. Now, what does this mean? We already talked about the 7. So when we say the regel ole, this must be talking about the 30. That the days of the holiday count towards the 30. So what case is this talking about? My love asefa. And this talking about this case that we just had, where someone dies during the holiday. And so we saw the whole law regarding Shiva. So if he dies in the middle of the holiday, those days of the holiday, that they count towards the 30. And if so, this would answer Rava's question, Abaye's question, in the opposite way that Rabba answered. Abaye's question was, if someone dies during the holiday, do the remaining days of the holiday count towards the Shiloshim? And Rabba said no, but you see here that if these words, Regel Mo, is referring to this last case, that's the case where someone died on the holiday, and it says you start counting the 30 days immediately. So therefore you should count them. But then we say la aresha. No, not necessarily. Maybe these words, Regel Lo, even though at the end, are actually referring to the first case in the Baraita. The first case in the Baraita was when someone dies a few days before the holiday. 2 days before the holiday starts. And so in that case, you start counting the 30 on that day. And so of course, everyone would agree in that case that you start counting the 30 immediately, and it goes right through the holiday and you count all those days. But that wasn't the question. The question was, do you start counting 30 even if someone dies in the middle? And so therefore, there is no proof either way for this. Let's finish this topic. Itibe. Abaye has another objection to Rabba. He wants to prove that you do start counting the 30 if someone dies in the middle of the holiday, and this is going to be a successful proof. Right? The holiday does in fact count towards 30. Kesad. If someone dies at the beginning of the holiday, right? In other words, he buries someone, he buries a loved one at the beginning of the holiday, even on Yom Tov Rishon. So then he'll start counting 7 after the holiday, right? Even though it's the first day, there's no Avelut. You don't do Shiva during the holiday. He has to start the Shiva on Motzei Chag. But since he didn't do work already for 7 days, you can't expect him not to do any work for 14 days. So therefore, we are lenient and we say he can't do work, the Avel can't do work, but he can hire others to do work for him. And his servants can work and discreetly in his house. And people don't have to visit him anymore. They already came and people came to visit him or during the 7 days of the holiday, right? You're allowed to come visit someone, even though he's not officially in Avelut, he's not sitting on the floor. And so therefore you have a total mismatch between the days on which he's not working and people are visiting him, but the actual mourning practices he does for the 7 days after. And then the last 3 words are that the holiday counts towards him, for him. Counts for what? Doesn't count for the Shiva, it counts for the Shiloshim. So here you go. Here's a case where someone buried a loved one during the holiday, and it says explicitly, there's no other way to interpret it, that the days of the holiday count towards the 30. And so therefore, Abaye's challenge to Rabbah is successful to Yufta. Yes, they do count. Ki ata Rabbi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, afilu kebaro ba regel v'chen ore le Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Pedat bere afilu kebaro ba regel. And then these two Amoraim agree that even if when someone dies during the holiday, the Shiloshim, we start counting during the holiday, even though the Shiva we only start counting after the holiday finishes. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen ve'amen.